Okay, guten Morgen, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Marcos Fajardo, and I'm here with Helge Maus from Pixeltrain. Did I say it right?
Yes, absolutely.
Today we're going to talk about VFX workflows in Cinema 4D. I'll just give you a little introduction about my company and the Arnold render. But before we do that, I'll just kind of play a little teaser reel. All right. So how many of you know about the Arnold renderer? Most people, okay. So I don't have to spend too much time explaining what it is, but Arnold is a render that we've developed at SolidAngle over the last 6 years, and I personally worked on for the last 18 years. So it's a very mature piece of software with a bunch of production features that you might not find in other renders. We have integrated Arnold into all of the major 3D applications like Cinema 4D, Maya, Self-Image, Houdini, Katana. We'll have various workshops here at FMX talking about each of these applications. And Arnold has been used on many of the recent films, like I'm showing here some pictures from Star Wars. All kinds of projects, commercials, visual effects for film, animated films. We've been doing a lot of work for the last few years. And the product has been expanding across all the VFX studios around the world. So if you're working if you plan to work on visual effects and animation anywhere in the world, it's quite likely that you will end up working with Arnold. So it's a good thing that you're here to learn about how Arnold works with Helge. Okay, so apart from showing you a bunch of images and videos, I wanted to talk about what's going on at SolidAngle now. We were recently acquired by Autodesk, as you might have heard, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about how that's going to influence or affect our Cinema 4D support. And the short answer is that it will not affect it in any way. We're going to continue to support Cinema 4D as far as, we'll take it as far as we can take it. We have a very tight relationship with MAXON and the developers, so we're going to continue to improve the plugin. Just making it faster, adding additional workflows, adding more shaders, that's not going to stop. So hopefully you guys will stick around with us and you'll see how our plugin continues to improve every day. Since the acquisition by Autodesk, we have released 4 versions of our Cinema 4D plugin, and this week we are releasing yet another version, so that shows how committed we are to developing for Cinema 4D. I think that's about it. So I think with that said, if you guys have any questions about SolidAngle or Arnold, you can do that right away, and then we'll pass over to the workshop. Any questions? Good. In that case, Helge.
Okay. Thank you, Marcos. Yeah, it's a pleasure for me to have a workshop together with MAXON and SolidAngle here in this room on FMX, and it's the first slot, I know. So I'm very, very thankful that we have filled our rows a little bit because today are the big presentations, first day, and everyone is motivated to see the big making-ofs, and yeah, so thank you. I want to talk a little bit first about me. That's the most important thing in this slot, you know? No. Okay. Some of you know me. I'm a trainer for 3D and visual effects software since 15 years now. I'm not a religious guy concerning about software. So I adapt, which I think is the best for clients. I train most of the cases workflows. And so I think from this perspective, my presentation tells you now, is Arnold in Cinema 4D something which you want to adapt? Do you want to really add it to your list? Or, you can really ask me about this. I don't want to be the SolidAngle presentator or the MAXON presentator. Yeah, we can talk about this openly. So you see a little bit about my work. I'm a beta tester for the Arnold integration in Maya and Cinema 4D. And so I have the comparison between these two. You will see it in a moment. I'm a MAXON lead instructor, so I know a little bit about Cinema 4D. And yeah, so I work most times with these software tools. You see, it's a whole bunch of software. It's about connecting software in my case. So I'm not an artist. I try a little bit, but I'm more the guy who comes. The artists show me, Helge, we have to do this in this project. Can you tell us how to get there without the budget, which is, a familiar house or something like that. Yeah. So this is a little bit about the things I do. Now I go to my live presentation. So if you have more questions, come to Marcus, come to me. I have a booth in the marketplace directly at the coffee booth. So it's an easy place to find. And we are around the whole week here. So ask us questions. So I switch over to website. If you want to start today with SolidAngle ARNOLD, what do you have to do? The easiest thing is go to SolidAngle, click here buy. Download the trial version. And the cool thing in the trial version of Arnold, from my perspective, is it never ends. It's not limited like other software. You can make a trial version, then you have a full renderer, and then when the license is expired, it runs only with a watermark. And this is the coolest thing for training. If you want to learn something, download it, work with it for free. You can test everything. It works fully. It's no limitation at all. But if you then have a license, you can rent a license for some days, weeks for a project. You can buy it. Then it is without a watermark. If you have to share your computer, you don't want that the license goes somewhere. Yeah, you have a watermark. You can go back. It's no problem. So it's easy to learn Arnold. This is the first thing. The next thing is Arnold is really sexy. So, because sometimes only brute force matters, Arnold, has a different approach to rendering and how it works. And I find on the Arnold page these 4 topics here really, really interesting because they explain exactly how Arnold works for me. The first thing is it's photorealistic. In most cases, I have to deliver today photorealistic images. In motion graphics, okay, sometimes you have non-realistic, but more and more we get visual effects also in motion graphics. Then we have the whole bunch of visualization in product for the industries and so on. So photorealistic, Arnold can do this for you in really an easy way. And this is the second point, easy to use. If you ever tried a third-party renderer, you buy it, you integrate it, then you have a bridge tool in the most cases, so you have to learn how your software tool works, your 3D application, in our case, Cinema 4D. Then you have to learn how the renderer thinks, and then you have a little piece in the middle, which most people drives crazy. It's the bridge. Yeah? You know what the renderer is able to do, you know what your software is able to do, and then you have a bridge which breaks everything. So the cool thing is Arnold is extremely easy. I will show it in a moment. And for me as a trainer, this is a bad point, you know. Complicated things are better for trainers, but you will see you will have more fun with the easy renderer. The next thing is memory efficiency, and you will see it in a moment here. I have a laptop. There is no big machine from Cat Networks under the, the table. So you will see you can throw everything on Arnold. Arnold scales, and this is an extremely cool thing, and for Cinema 4D users, the first question is, and Team Render, does it support Team Render? Yeah, it supports Team Render. There's a little hook, but you can ask Markus about this. You have to buy licenses for every machine. Not for CPU, not for
rent.
The course, or you can rent. But yeah, we have to pay, but this is really a normal thing out in the industry. If you have something else than Cinema 4D, you always have to buy render licenses. But you can rent, it's easy to do. Plug it in, and you can render on many machines as you like with Team Renderer. So no breaking in this thing. And the last thing is, and the most important, easy to switch. So Arnold is a brute force renderer. It ray traces everything. No tricks, no things behind the curtain. Everything is ray traced. So sometimes only brute force matters. Yeah? And so if you ever worked with an unbiased renderer out there, you know, okay, there are unbiased renderers out there, but they are really complicated. You have to think about material setups, and they are really complicated. And the cool thing in Arnold is it talks the language of a biased renderer. You have a diffuse amount, you have a specular amount, you have a reflection amount, everything you know. You know this from other, biased renderers, but it's an unbiased renderer in the back. So this is a little bit about why Arnold is cool, And the next thing for a Cinema 4D user, who makes a third-party renderer addition to its portfolio is it supported? Maybe the renderer is cool, but how current is the version you get as a Cinema 4D user? And so I show you something. If you go to the SolidAngle downloads, like Markus said, we have different bridges out there. It's always the same Arnold in the back. And here you see the Maya version, the Softimage version, the Houdini version, and the Cinema version, and so on. And if I show you now here my plugin version, oh shit. Live stream is always cool. So, okay, you see here the releases of Arnold for Cinema 4D in the last couple of years. The version 1.0 was released in May 2015. And now you see this whole bunch of new releases. If you have a dot release here, you see we have always new features in it. You see new feature support. New feature support. This was June, July, and so on. And now if I look into the recent time, we're here in February, new features here with particles. We have a new shader. We have a better preview of materials. Then we have a release in March. You see we have AOVs, multipass features here. We have then one in April, and you see you get more and more stuff all the time. So we have absolutely the same Arnold like in Maya, like in Houdini, like in Katana all the time. And this is something really cool for a third-party renderer from my perspective. So enough on the web page. Now we want to switch to a tool which you maybe know, and you see this scene is visual effects, without limits, You see something you know. The first question is, where is Arnold now? How is the installation made? The installation is extremely easy. You throw it into your plugins folder, and the first thing you normally go is here. You have here your renderers installed on your machine, and here you see here's the Arnold renderer. You switch it on, that's it. Where are all the fancy options now? Like I've said, Arnold is easy. And if I close this here, the only things you really have to think about rendering in Arnold, we'll come back to this point later, is how noise-free do you want to have your image sampling? So it's the same like in anti-aliasing, How much grain you can live with in your image. This is one thing, this is quality. And the next thing, because everything is ray traced in Arnold, the only thing you have to think about is how deep you want to go into the rabbit hole. How many bounces you want to render. In some cases, you can live with one bounce because it's an open scene. In other cases, you want to have a really high bounce amount. That's it. So if you understand these two blocks of parameters, everything is done in Arnold. That's the cool thing. And what I like a lot is here you have a little statistics. So if you change here something, you always get here calculated what this will do with your sampling, your ray depth. You always understand what Arnold does in the background. So we will come to this point in a moment back. So these are the render settings for us. The next thing is we have a wonderful new plugins menu here. This is Cinema 4D for Arnold. And I dock it out so that I can work a little bit easier here. Then we have tags. You know, tags are always important in Cinema 4D, and you have a tag for everything, yeah? You always have a tag for coffee making or so. But in the case of Arnold, you see you have here the big tag menu, and you see, oh, only 5 tags in the moment? What's that? But the coolest thing is there is one tag which can do everything. And this is the Arnold parameters tag. And this is a really intelligent tag, you will see. If you place this tag here on a geometry, you see, you get it. Things you know from the compositing or the render tag on German. You see, you can tell how this geometry interacts with all the stuff which is going on. Then we want to have subdivisions. You see, okay, you can now Catmull-Clark it or make a linear subdivision here. So it depends on the geometry you have. Easy. Displacement settings, exporting stuff, really fancy stuff for visual effects, and a little bit about motion blur. Okay, so this here, this tag here knows now this is a geometry which is setting on. Let us take a light source. I take a light source here and drag the same tag here on the light source. And ta-da, you see, this tag has adapted. You see, now for the light source, you can change the exposure, for example. Or you can change the sampling, the radius of the light source, and so on. So it's a really intelligent tag. You only have to know one tag. You drag it, and the tag knows what it gives you as parameters. It's really, really easy. Okay, so what about old scenes? This is also a question which most people have. Oh, I have old scenes. How to get Arnold working in an old scene? Have I do it again? No, you don't have to. I have switched on Arnold. You've seen in the render settings, you have a light source here. I don't have it on in the moment. And if you click render, you get your first, so ugly image, you see. Yeah, but it works. You see, it works. But if you want to do more Arnold, that's the reason why we are here. You can now try to say, okay, I have a shadow. We have these fancy Cinema 4D shadows. I hate. But if you go then here, Arnold now has its options. You can set now this Arnold tag on everything and work with this. I do not recommend this. So if you really want to work with Arnold, get rid of this stuff. But you can. You can transport your scene over. So, where is Arnold also? Material system. You see, we have a whole bunch of Arnold material system options here. The most important things are the surface shaders. You see here we have a shaders library. I will talk a little bit about shaders in a moment, but if you want to have a standard material, standard shader, you have here a very well-built standard shader here from the Arnold world. If you go into this shader, you see everything you know from other renderers. You see a diffuse amount and colors and all this stuff, specularity, reflections, and so on. So this is something you are really familiar with. This is something you know from other renderers also. Okay, that's all for the moment. So now let us do something. The first thing which I find annoying when I'm making setups is that I always have to press render. We always want to see how does it look, how does it look, how does it look in all cases. And so in Arnold it's nice, you can have an IPR renderer running all the time, and I don't have a GPU. And this is a discussion you maybe can do with Markus, the difference between CPU and GPU. There are pros and cons on both sides, so it's a good thing to discuss, but I have only CPU here. So this is always a CPU rendering, and you will see in a moment why. So if you want to add a light source, you have here all the light sources you know from Cinema 4D. You have here standard things like a quad light. This is the area light we use in photorealistic visualizations, but you also have a point light, which you can change the radius, which is really nice from the perspective of the realism. For architectural stuff, you have a photometric light. You can add IES files to it to have the right fall-offs. Then you have here some special lights. I will now place a light which is named Sky Dome light. It's a light which fills the whole scene with a sphere which surrounds the whole scene here, and now you see we have our first light in the scene, and this light source here comes from all directions and lights up our scene. It's a little bit like the sky sampler thing we knew from Cinema 4D. And now we go here into the light sources, and you remember I said here Arnold is easy. So let us take a look into the light source itself. You see, okay, we can change the color. Yeah, that's easy. We want to have another color as a light source, but it looks ugly. Then we have intensity, and the cool thing with intensity is, yeah, you see the feedback always here. It's really fast. Yeah, you can really see, and it defines it all the time. We have a resolution. We have exposure. This is something which is really interesting. Some people come from more the 3D background. They are used to, yeah, things like percent, for example, 0 to 100% light intensity, something like that. But if you are a photographer, you don't think in these areas. You think in stops. Stop up, stop down, yeah, double the light, or make it half. So you can use both here. And if you have later a camera, you have the same settings. So you can stop something up and down. It's really nice to do. And then you have here the samples, how noise-free you want to have it. And that's it. This area here is only for tweaking stuff. You don't need this for your standard thing. So the only thing you really have to think about in a light source is the intensity. How much light do I want to have? In which color? You will see in a moment we can use HDRs and so. And that's it. Everything else is photorealistic, calculated by Arnold. That's easy, I think. So how to get this here now to an HDR lighting? There are two ways. And this is something my trainees sometimes miss. You have here a color value. Okay, this is clear. But have you seen that every of these options here have a little triangle also? You can open them up, and you can change what type of information you want to plug in into this field. And this is really interesting, because Arnold comes from a world which is node-based. So in other programs, you have a node-based approach. But we in cinema don't have a big node-based UI. We can't do everything like that in a nodal way. We'll see a little bit in a moment. But here you have the possibilities to say, okay, I want to have a constant value. I want to have a texture value. And so you see your familiar texture slot, you know, from Cinema 4D. You can now load your HDR. And you can switch here to a link field. And this is something you know as a Cinema 4D artist. In a link field, you can drop another object. And the programmers are really clever at this point. They said, okay, we don't have a nodal approach in Cinema 4D, but how can I connect stuff together? And the cool thing is we have this material manager. So we can go to the materials manager, into the Arnold section, and under textures, we have two sky models. A standard sky and a physical sky, which is the same like you know from Cinema 4D, a physical sky model. And I take here a sky node. Yeah? And if I have this, I make a double click here, and you see here now, you can have this node here configured. And I said we don't have a nodal approach. The programmers of SolidAngle, we are really, really clever. Some things only make sense in nodal approaches. And they built for us a full network editor. You see, it looks a little bit like Espresso. Yeah, they used the ideas of Espresso, but it's now really a shading tree we can use. And if you want, for example, to load an image, then you can here add an image node, you drag it in, and if you select this image node, you get here your attributes like you're used to in Cinema 4D. So I can now load here an HDR from my files, for example, here the conference room. And if I load this, no, I want to have a connection here, you can drag it and you can make a connection like this. Yeah? We will come to this point in a moment. And now, if you now want to drag something into a link field, you drag it here, and now you see this here is now rendered with an HDRI. So now you have the first IBL setup. But I could go in here and load the texture directly. Why do I have to do something like that? Why do I want to have a node here? Because sometimes you want to see this texture also in the background. Yeah? So you have two uses of the same information you produce. And so if I go here to the Arnold render settings and go here to the environment settings, there is a background option, like a background object or so. And you can use the same node now here. So the same node makes now a background image, which doesn't do any lighting. If I switch here the lighting off, you see it's only a background image which is in the back, but it also delivers for us here this lighting scenario. So this is a standard IBL setup. Yeah? If you want to change it, you can go to the node here, and you see that this node is really clever. You can tell, okay, do I want to have shadows? Do I want to have this scene in reflections also? And so on. You have all these options you normally have in a render tag. And you can have a full nodal setup in the node editor to combine all this stuff together. Okay, now we have a little bit of light. Wonderful. The next thing is, now I need materials. Okay, I have here my standard shader, which I built. If you want to do one here, you can go here to the surface shader, make a standard shader here, you drag it onto your object, and that's all the things you have to do. Yeah, you drag it in here, you get here your texture tag, and then you can work. Let us take a look into this material system now for a moment. And there's a nice feature in this IPR, so that I can zoom in a little bit better for you. You can switch the IPR appearance here into the big screen, and I think then we can see it. It's undersampled, you see here, it's only 50%. You can change it to 100, but I'm on a laptop, so maybe it's nicer for you not waiting, but seeing what's going on. Yeah, this is the material system. You know from other renderers also, you have here material color, wonderful. Everyone knows that I love orange, so yeah, I can make orange. You have here the weight, and this is something really important. Arnold's material is energy conserving. That means you always have to think about the albedo, how much light you reflect with the surface. And you know that a good renderer normally makes a decision. You say, I want to have only 70% reflected, and what happens if you increase at the other point in the shader the energy amount, for example, in reflection or so. And so the shader has to equalize all this back so that you don't get more energy reflected than you get. So this is done in this shader. So here you can tell how much light you want to reflect here in the diffuse reflection. And everyone from trainings know diffuse reflection is something like how many little facets you have on the surface, how many distribution you have on the surface. So here you have a roughness slider you can change, and you see if you have a surface which is rougher, you get a softer look, you get more diffuse look. And here's an option which I like a lot. It's backlighting. I have to show this in a different scene. So let us stop the render for a moment and make extremely fast backlighting scene. I go in here, make a plane, make it here, stand up, and now we need here our victim standing behind this, because we want to throw light on this object. And I say, okay, I want to have, for example, what we take a quad light, so that you have seen a quad light. You see, the quad lights have one direction. You see it here in the widget. You can rotate them until you like the positioning. And we can render this. You see, okay, it works like expected. If you want to have now more power, you remember, you can go into the light source, change the intensity. This is one way of doing it. Or you can say, I want to have it faster, change the exposure, because you stop up and down, it's faster. Yeah? So we make a little bit of light here. And now comes the nice part. You want to have here a surface which is a part translucent. So if you try to do something like that in Cinema 4D, for example, you have to use a backlight shader, but you know it's a really bad fake, yeah, because you only get the shadow on the other side and a color. But it has nothing to do with the scene itself. And now take a look. At the moment, this plane here blocks everything. That's nice. But if you go here now into the materials and change the backlight amount, you see that now the lights really come through this plane, and it remembers all the settings you have here in your standard material. So it's no fake, it's really going through this area here, and if I make the lights so smaller so you get a sharper shadow, you really see it's a really fast way of backlighting. So I like it a lot. If you want to have a nice example, you know, in presentations, if you try to show something, it's a little bit complicated to have always the nice images. So I've prepared a little bit here. So you see, this is a typical backlighting image. You see, really the paper blocks out the light, and you see exactly what you want to see. And I think a little bit more impressive is this image here. You see every leaf has light from the backside and also the shadows from the backside. And this is a very cool effect you can have in your rendering without thinking about backlight shaders and so on, where you can't achieve something like that. Okay, this was the backlighting option. We go back here into our material system. Then we go down here, diffuse, specular. Specular is the same like reflection. In physics, there is no difference between a specular and reflection. Both are reflections, yeah? But we, as 3D artists, think a little bit in specular, like it's a reflection which is most of the case a little bit blurry. It's really blurry, then you get a specular spot somewhere, something, and you can increase the sharpness of this until you come to the reflection. And this is the same way here Arnold thinks. You see, you have the weight, how much you want to deliver into your result. If you have a 100% specular surface, you see it looks like this. Now comes the question, what's going on here? Why it is so blurry? Because this is roughness. You see, you can change your roughness, and you see how fast Arnold here thinks about these settings. You see, it's a really, really fast way. We have now new, since some versions, two models we can use. We have Beckman and GGX, so you can decide which type of specular you want to have. You also have your anisotropy settings, you can rotate them and so on. And the most important thing in area photorealistic visualization is Fresnel. Never use reflections without Fresnel. Yeah, you can have Fresnel here, tick it on, and now comes the cool part. You have a reflectance at normal. I always say this is a little bit like fakey, a little bit, the Fresnel, yeah? You don't have an IOR in your head, you only want to have a look, yeah? So this is nice. You see? A little bit more, a little bit less, yeah? You can play, but it's a Fresnel, yeah? It's a reflection at normal. It's really nice if you only want to deliver something which you have in mind, but you don't know the real values. If you have the values, then you can go here into the refractions, because here you have your IOR. Here you can place your IOR like you know, and then comes the nice tick. Fresnel uses this IOR everywhere in the whole shader. Yes, do it. And now you see my fakey thing here is gone. Now it really uses the Fresnel which you've entered there. So it's two ways of doing it. You see, now you have a 11 IOR, you have a really strong reflection or something like water or so. You see, you can play with this like you want. Okay, this is specular amount. And the specular amount, to keep in mind, is the only reflection which sees the environment. This is really important to understand here. The next one is the real reflection, the straight reflection. Yeah, so you can have this also stacked in the system. Refraction, okay. In refraction, you have these things you know from other renderers also. You have a color, you have a weight, how much you want to deliver. Here you normally say, okay, I don't want to have a diffuse amount. Yeah, specularly you have, but it looks a little bit funny. And this is something trainees run into. The problem, they say, oh yeah, I want to have a refraction, and they enter glass for something, and then they say, it looks a little bit odd. Sometimes this guy here had to make a little bit improvements because we ray trace everything. And the problem is, if you ray trace everything, sometimes take a little bit longer. Yeah? Sometimes. And there's a little information you give the renderer about this object. And this, because every time we give information to the renderer, we make this wonderful magic tag here. You see, there's a little tick here which says opaque. So this object here is opaque in the moment. If you remove this, yeah, then suddenly this odd big shadow thing disappears, because now it is really seen from the shadow perspective and all the other perspectives as a refractive, transparent object, and now it really can render us. Otherwise, it shows a refraction, but in the shadows, you don't see it. Yeah? You still get an opaque object. And this is something you have to keep in mind. Yeah? Little reminder, switch off opaque if you really want to calculate through. If you now see that your ray depth is not deep enough, you remember my introduction. If you want to have more, go here into the ray depth and decide which kind of ray you want to throw deeper. And you see in the refractions, we only have two bounces, in the moment. So you can say, yeah, make it 4 times or whatever, yeah, and so you increase for only this feature. And that's the cool thing in Arnold. You really can say, only this feature, I want to have more ray depth. Not in all of them, only these. Yeah? You can really work in this. Okay. This is a little bit about refractions. You also have Abbe numbers, if you like them, transmittance numbers. Abbe, you know, if you want to make a diamond and you want to have the chromatic aberration on the edges in the refraction, so you can go to refractiveindex.info, look for the Abbe number, enter it here, and you get these chromatics. So you can make wonderful glass diamonds and all this nice jewelry stuff. Then you have here subsurface scattering. Cool. There's no separate subsurface scattering shader here because, like I've said, nothing is fake here. Everything is done real. And it's done in ray tracing. So another terrible scene. I want to demonstrate it really fast for you. I go here, make a light source which really, now looks onto this cube. We go here and make a really fast shader again. And this is the standard shader. This is the cool one. Really, you don't have to learn 100 shaders now. This shader does this, and this shader does this. And yeah, you see absolutely the result you expect. Yeah, you get a light source on a cube. And you can change it here to something yellowish. And yeah, you get a yellow reflection. But what happens if you want to have a little bit interaction? You want to throw the light into this object, like in chocolate, in jade, or something like that. So the light penetrates under the surface and comes back, subsurface scattering. And here it's really easy. You say, okay, this is the diffuse amount, you can have a specular amount, everything else. Then you go here and say how much you want to deliver. Weight is always how much you want to deliver. I say, yeah, give it to me, and I increase it. But you see, it's very subtle. And now comes the thing, oh, do I have tweak settings, magic point clouds or something like that? No. Take a look. This cube here is 2 meters in the moment. So 2 meters deep. We only go into the surface 10 centimeters. So we are really, really at the surface. Now we can do it. Yeah, 2 meters. And now you see, the light penetrates now through this volume and does exactly the job. And you can tweak the colors in two ways. One is not so physical. You say, oh, I want to have it a little bit bluish here. You see? Yellow at the surface, bluish in the dark. It looks nice, yeah? But the more physical approach is a little different. Normally light scatters. Everyone knows from school. Blue light scatters first, then other colors, and then red is the last one which scatters. And the surface color you normally see is the result of the scattering of the light rays. And what you can do here is you have here radius, and you maybe thought about, okay, X, Y, Z, why I have here something like that? This doesn't make sense. No, it's not X, Y, Z. It's RGB. How deep, which ray goes through the volume? And if you say, okay, for example, I say red isn't going through the volume so deep, only 100. You see, you go now to the bluish one, because blue can go deeper, red doesn't go so deep. Yeah? So you really can change these values and say how deep you want to play with which color. And so you get really interesting color results here. If you say, okay, for example, you see here now, you have different depth information. Here it's a little bit reddish, then we have a big blue part, and so on. So you can mix, or you can do it here like that. Okay, this is subsurface scattering. Emission, yeah, you can make light, wonderful. This is also happening. Caustics, complicated many renderers. Here, oh, no settings. Yes, I want to have.
Can any substance be emissive? Can any object be
Yes, you can combine these two, yeah. You see?
any geometry, anything is emissive?
Yeah, you can assign a standard shader to any geometry and increase the emission.
Yeah. So here,
You can also turn any object into a specific type of light called a mesh light, which is sampled more efficiently.
okay. So everything is in this standard shader. You can combine everything. You don't have to think about 3 shaders. But now comes the next part. Now we have seen the standard shader, and now you are happy, and you go home, and then you remember, oh, something was missing. I never have only colors on an object. Normally, I have textures. Where the heck are the textures? Yeah, so you haven't shown us. Let us take a closer look. No texture port, no triangle. Oh. How does it work? Like I've said, normally Arnold thinks in a nodal way. And so if you really want now to work with textures, you want to stack them together, layering, and all this crazy stuff, you say, okay, this was nice until this point, but now give me the full Arnold. And you click here. And now you see what you have done all the time in this shader here was only changing the attributes of this little node here. And now comes the nice part. You have all these options here as inputs at this side here. You can plug everything in these node ports, and this is really nice. So if you really want, for example, now to have an image, you see most of the cases I write the node name. But if you take a closer look, here are surface shaders, and you see a whole bunch of them. I have a little bit more than you normally if you install them, because I have third-party shaders installed. I will show it in some seconds to you. But if you know here the names, you can enter here only the word. You say, yeah, I want to have this node. And you know this image node. I can now load something here into my setup. And I say, yeah, I want to have here a texture. For example, this texture here, you load this, wonderful, then you want to see it here in the diffuse color. You make a connection and you see it on your object if you render this. So it's really easy to do. The question is, what happens here? Why is this still orange? Because I had the wrong shader. So, better. Yeah, now you see, it does exactly the job. And this is really the whole thing you have to know about Arnold shading. So you can have as many image shaders as you like. You plug them in, they can drive everything, the weight, the Fresnels, everything. But sometimes not only one image will do it, sometimes you have to stack something. And so for this, we have a layer node. And you see layer color here is a full stack like in Adobe Photoshop. Yeah, you have here a whole bunch of layers, layer 1. This is a work in process. We have turned this now around because most people think like Photoshop from down to up, yeah, not in the different. So you can say, okay, I want to have layer 1, and this is a nice feature, I like it. You can take this attribute and drop it here, and then you plug it in like this. Then you have to decide the alpha is 1, so you get the same result like before. And then you can have a next image node, plug it over this, make a next layer. This is about images, but now comes a point which I like also a lot. You see, I like Arnold. This is a standard shader. And a standard shader has many, many, many attributes, like reflections and all this stuff. You can have as many shaders here in this tree as you like. The question is, how do they get on the same object? You can have a layer shader. Yeah? You can layer images, but you also can layer full shaders. Yeah? And in every layer, you can decide how they mix together. So for example, you can say, okay, in one shader, I have a nice distribution of normals or something like that. It's nice. But my diffuse is black, and then I add on this a shader which is empty but only has colors. And so you can add all this stuff together, alpha them. It's a really cool way of working. So this is a little bit about thinking in this here. Now comes the next part. What about things like displacement or so? We need this all the time. So I take this standard shader here, plug it in so that you can see something. And now I want to have something to displace. And I take, for example, a noise or something like that. And this noise here I deliver first to the beauty so that we can see. And this noise, you see, it's very, very blurry in the moment. So maybe I want to have a little bit, yeah, faster noise. So we can go 2, 2, 2. Is it better? No, softer, so 5, 5, 5. Yeah. Now you have a little bit faster noise, some octaves more, something like that. So now I bring back my standard shader, and I want to displace now this surface. And you see we have 3 ports here. The Arnold beauty is everything which means shading. The Arnold displacement is exactly what you think of. Boop. Now you displace your surface. Let us look. It looks a little bit funny. Yeah? Why? Let us look into our shape. The first thing is you always have to remember that you only can displace points which are really there. So we have only this can, we don't have enough points, and so normally we go into subdividing, but I go down with the displacement a little bit, and here in the subdivisions you can now say, I want to have it Catmull clocked 2 times, and you see the result gets better and better. Yeah? So easy like that. Why do I see here, if I have here 100 centimeters, this block here? This has something to do with the boundaries. Yeah? A ray tracer only thinks a little bit in blocks, and so if you want to increase the bounds, you see, yeah, this is displacement. Yeah, you can increase here the bounds with no effort. Okay, so displacement is clear. I want to have the last 10 minutes for some cool stuff. I think you understand now how it works, how easy it is, but what about the really, really cool stuff going on in Arnold? What we have now here. The first thing you can remember, I told you I have third-party shaders. If you go here to the shader tree, you see I have, beside the standard shader, which Arnold delivers, one shader which is named AL surface. And this is a third-party shader. And there's a programmer out there, Anders, and he writes wonderful shaders for Arnold. This is the web page. There you can download them. And the cool thing about these third-party shaders is that they are plugins for the renderer. not for Cinema 4D. So that means you can use the same shaders like in Maya, in Houdini, here now also in Cinema 4D. You don't have a special package and you don't have to wait. You can use the same ones. And I use these Anders Langland shaders here. I've installed them in Cinema 4D, and so that's the reason why I have here more shaders in this tree and also in the node graph. So if I go here to the node graph and look here, for example, to the surfaces, you see everything which has AL is from the third party. It works really, really efficient and nice here. So I normally, install these shaders here, and you have more features than to your Arnold renderer. Next thing, how good is, for example, a plugin supported? If you work in Cinema 4D, you normally use, for example, XParticles, because with XParticles you can do really amazing stuff. How does Arnold think about plugins? If you go here and press play, you don't see these particles. But now comes the cool point. You can make geometry out of particles, but you don't want this. Because if you have millions of particles, you don't want to have this big geometry. But what you can do is take this wonderful tag. Again, you see this tag is super duper. And now you suddenly see this tag translates XParticles particles to Arnold particles. And Arnold has a very, very capable particle renderer built in. And so this translation is done. And if you take here a closer look, you can tell Arnold how these particles are rendered as point clouds, as spheres, and so on. So this is something you can do. You can use the whole XParticles world here in this shader. The next thing I want to show you, splines. Splines are normally used for modeling purposes or maybe for hair. The cool thing is Arnold also understands what a spline is. So what do I have to do? Add the tag, like always, add the tag. And now you see, I make it bigger for you. You see now you get a rendering of this spline here. And now comes the cool part. You can tell how many subdivisions you want to have, and if you have a material, you can place it on this object. I have to check which material I have. So maybe I take a new one here, a standard shader, Arnold, make it bluish or something like that, blue. And go now here. And I don't have a light source. That was the thing. With light sources always works better. I take here a physical sky for a moment. Okay, now you see this is a spline rendering going on the fly. This is made in the renderer, not as geometry. So you can do something like that. And now comes normally the next question. Okay, if you can render splines, which special kind of spline do we have? Hair. So if you have a hair renderer, then you can make amazing stuff. Let us try. You go here and say, I want to have Cinema 4D hairs on it. And now you see splines. Arnold renders these hairs as splines. And this is really cool because you have all the features of the Cinema 4D hair here in the system. You see, it looks really like Helge in the morning. But how is shading done? Because you know that hair normally is shaded from the strand. So Arnold delivers you a wonderful hair surface shader, and you can add this to the system, and in this hair shader you can now start to change your colors, change your shading, and so on. And you see, you can work like that, so no problem. Next thing, Turbulence FD. I think you like I do, fire and all these effects. Is supported? Yes, it's fully supported. So if you take a look here on my presentation, I've done here these two images here. This here is XParticles, this head. You see the particles rendered with Arnold, and the strands you see are splines which are generated by a trailer. And this trailer is a spline, so we can render it in Arnold. And this is the result. Yeah? Here on the right side, you see a cup of coffee. And you see here the fire. This is Turbulence FD. It's native rendered in Arnold. So fully supported, really easy. Yeah? You see, Arnold is really, really easy to implement. And if you have, I have 3 minutes left, some questions or features you want to know or see, I will answer this. If you have to know more about Arnold, I'm the whole week at the booth in the marketplace coffee shop, and I have the software here. We can play together, and I can show you nearly everything. So, any questions about features or so? For Max?
Arnold for Max, yeah.
I can't tell you because Markus is now gone. I'm not the Max user. So sorry, I can't answer.
Okay.
But I will ask him later, and if you come to the booth, I will answer it later. Yeah. Any more questions? Please ask me. No questions at all?
Do you know the pricing for the team render license?
It's on the web page. It's really cheap because you can rent them, so you can really scale in a project. So there's a special pricing thing you have to keep in mind. There's a Cinema 4D license, which is much cheaper than the full Arnold license. The thing with the Cinema license is it's for the Cinema 4D users, because we are not so used to pay a lot for renderers, but a lot is not really, yeah, it's cheaper. But if you are a user like I do, you are working in Houdini, for example, I will have tomorrow a Houdini presentation where I show you Houdini Engine. And Houdini Indy is now supporting third-party renderers. So you can render with Arnold from Houdini Indy now. So it's a better choice to make maybe the little bit more expensive Arnold license, because then you get all the plugins for free. Yeah, you have one Arnold, and you can work with Maya, with Houdini, with Cinema on the same license. So maybe this is an important thing for your workflow. Anything else?
Just roughly, what is the difference with the standard shader and the third-party shader that
Yeah. It's a little bit, the AL shader is much broader in the feature set. Yeah, you have two speculars at the same time, and you can stack them directly. And so, I know many companies who tend to work with the AL shaders and not with the standard. But the standard is really brilliant, good. You also get a skin shader here with Arnold standard. You have, like I've said, a really good skin shader. You have here things like ambient occlusion shaders and so on. But you can build them really easy by yourself. For example, if you have multipassing going on and you say, I need a shader which does in multipassing always a pass which makes wireframes, because my client always wants to see if the topology is right, you can build the shader by your own without programming. Yeah, you take your standard shader, make a wireframe shader, and then you connect them. Yeah. Okay, then thanks a lot. And come to the Pixel Train booth and have fun on FMX, and yeah, thank you.